The 2010s. I mean, it feels like it was just yesterday, right? But that decade, wow, it completely rewired how we live, how we dress, how we connect with each other. It was just a massive, massive shift, all packed into 10 little years. So, okay, let's dive in. Let's really unpack the decade that basically built the world we're living in right now.
I want you to picture this. It's New York City, 2011. We're all still kind of shaking off the 2008 recession. The iPhone is everywhere, sure, but the internet in your pocket? It's not quite seamless yet. It's a grittier time, you know? It feels a little more analog. And in the nightlife of big cities, New York, London, LA, there's this very specific vibe taking over.
And this quote, man, it just nails it. This was the era of what we now call Indie Sleaze. Think harsh flash photography in a dark club, smudged eyeliner, and just this general feeling of messy, carefree fun. It was really the last gasp of a pre-Instagram world, where a night out was something you actually lived, not something you broadcasted for an audience in real time.
So let's break that down. Indie Sleaze was all about being over the top. It was messy on purpose. It was throwing together neon colors, metallics, maybe an animal print, a vintage band t-shirt, just because you could. It was the absolute uniform of the party, and it was a total rejection of anything that looked too polished or too perfect. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This whole vibe started to evolve online, and the online hub back then wasn't Instagram, it was Tumblr. And on Tumblr, that indie sleaze thing kind of softened into what we call soft grunge. You've still got the rebellious stuff, the plaid shirts, the combat boots, but now they're getting mixed with more romantic, delicate pieces. This was the aesthetic that defined a whole generation of bloggers and all of their followers.
And of course, you absolutely cannot talk about the early 2010s without talking about the hipster. This was less about the party scene and more about a very carefully curated, almost intellectual kind of look. It was all about taking vintage things, stuff your grandpa might have worn, like suspenders and bow ties, and then repackaging them with a heavy, heavy dose of irony. It started out as a subculture, but man, it blew up and became a mainstream uniform really, really fast.
But here's the crucial thing to remember. All these early decade trends, they were intensely local. Before the global algorithmic feed made everything look the same, culture was literally bubbling up from specific streets in specific cities. So for this explainer, we're going to tell a tale of 3 cities. We've got the Hypebeast mecca of LA, the trap music capital of Atlanta, and the hipster paradise of Brooklyn.
All right, let's start out on the West Coast. In the early 2010s, if you were into streetwear, there was one, and only one, place you had to be, Fairfax Avenue in Los Angeles. This random street became the unofficial global headquarters for what we now call Hypebeast culture. And what's just wild is how quickly this all happened. Bobby Hundreds, who co-founded the legendary brand The Hundreds, he paints this picture of like a super sleepy neighborhood. You went there for a sandwich, not for a limited edition sneaker drop. But then a single skate shop, Supreme, opened up in 2004, and it started this massive chain reaction. This quote from Wiz Khalifa just perfectly shows the power of that whole scene. Owning a piece from a Fairfax shop was like having a secret password. It was this status symbol that said you were in the know, you were part of this exclusive club. That culture was so potent that it turned a local scene into a global movement, pulling in celebrities, artists, and fans from all over the world. Okay, let's jump over to our next city, Atlanta. In the 2010s, Atlanta was birthing a sound that would pretty much conquer the entire world, trap music. Now, the groundwork was laid by pioneers like T.I. and Gucci Mane, but the 2010s is when trap absolutely exploded and became the most dominant force in all of hip-hop. So what was the magic recipe? What made this sound so distinct? Well, it was a very specific set of ingredients. You have that booming 808 bass, those super fast, skittering hi-hats, and these dark, atmospheric synth melodies. It was music that was somehow both hard-hitting and totally hypnotic, creating a sound that you immediately knew was from Atlanta. And if you had to pick one moment that launched trap from being a regional sound to a global powerhouse, it was this. Bad and Bougie wasn't just a hit song, it was a full-blown cultural event. All of a sudden, the Atlanta sound, its slang, its style, it was everywhere, influencing pop music, high fashion, and even how we talked, all around the world. And for our final city, we're landing in Brooklyn, specifically in neighborhoods like Williamsburg. This was ground zero for hipster culture. It was where this whole aesthetic, built on thrift store finds and intellectual irony, was perfected before it got exported to the rest of the world.
And the look, well, it became, let's be honest, a uniform. You had the skinny chinos, the cardigans, and of course the ever-present horn-rimmed glasses, which you might not even needed to see. It was such a specific look that for a good few years there was the absolute peak of mainstream cool for urban millennials.
So you've got these three vibrant, totally distinct, super local cultures all thriving. But at the exact same time, a technological shift was happening that was about to change the entire game. A silent revolution was going on right there in our pockets.
And it all came down to this: the jump from 3G to 4G mobile networks. I mean, on paper, it's just a bunch of numbers, right? But the difference in speed was staggering. We're talking a tenfold increase. It might not sound that revolutionary, but this single leap was about to change everything.
Okay, to put that speed jump into perspective, think about this. Trying to download an 800 megabyte movie on a 3G network, that took about 5 hours. On 4G, it took just 43 seconds. That is the difference between planning ahead and just pure instant gratification. This was the moment the internet was truly, finally untethered from the desktop.
And really, it's hard to overstate this shift. 4G wasn't just faster internet. It was the foundation, the actual oxygen that allowed this whole new ecosystem of apps to even exist. Apps like Uber, Spotify, and most importantly, Instagram, they just couldn't have worked on the old, slower 3G network. And here is the huge consequence of all that. With seamless, high-speed internet in our pockets 24/7, social media completely changed. It stopped being a log of things you did yesterday, it became a real-time broadcast of what you were doing right now. Life wasn't just for living anymore, it was for broadcasting. And this is what gave rise to the influencer and the whole visual economy of Instagram.
And you can literally see on this timeline how that tech shift directly hit our culture. In the early part of the decade, fashion was driven by local scenes and blogs. By the mid-decade, as 4G and Instagram took over, trends were being set by a handful of global influencers pushing this clean, minimalist, super camera-ready look. And by the end of the decade, Hypebeast culture, which was once stuck on Fairfax Avenue, was now a global aesthetic driven by viral drops on apps.
So let's just synthesize all of this. In 2010, you'd post to Facebook later from a laptop. By 2019, you were live streaming your life on the go. Fashion went from locally grown skinny jeans to globally streamed athleisure. Music went from downloading MP3s to streaming Atlanta trap on Spotify. Even the simple act of getting around a city went from hailing a cab to calling an Uber, all of it powered by that 4G connection. Which brings us to our main takeaway here. The 2010s started as a decade where culture was really defined by the physical city, a specific street corner in LA, a club in Brooklyn. But it ended as the decade of the feed, where our culture is now defined not by geography, but by an algorithm on a smartphone screen. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. As we look back on it all, was this the last time we had truly distinct, organic, local cultures before the global feed just made everything everywhere feel a little bit the same? It's something worth chewing on as we live in the world that 2010s created.